Hi, my name's Phil. I'd like to talk about politics, and in this video I'd like to discuss whether the Channel Tunnel can survive Brexit. Now, although this isn't a prospect for the immediate end to the transition period, there'll be plenty of time to talk about that in the next week or so. Unlike a lot of other cross-border infrastructure, of course, the current trajectory would actually mean that the Channel Tunnel's future could be in severe doubt if hardline Brexit mentality continues to dominate Brexit pragmatism in 2021. But first, if you'd like to be notified of daily news and politics, please subscribe to the channel and click the bell notification icon. So, I remember the construction and completion of the Channel Tunnel. It was fantastic. I was a young lad at the time. I think there were chiefly two abiding memories of this. First of all, of course, it represented a huge engineering triumph as a result of the cooperation of two nations who already had a very impressive engineering history. And we built a tunnel under the bloody sea, for goodness sake. Not just to let a few people scuttle under. We have trains and lorries and cars coming backwards and forwards on it. And the second thing is it represented a real political closeness. France and England, who had famously been at war on a regular basis for the past millennium, literally reached out the hands of friendship, connecting us permanently. It was celebrated for both the engineering triumph and the political triumph, a monumental achievement. Now, I was young at the time, I was still growing up, okay, I'm not going to be in tune with all of the political feelings, but if there were significant voices of populist division in the UK back then, they were too quiet for me, a young teenager, to hear. I only saw people's pride at the coming together. That's all I saw on the news or with people talking. And now we have Brexit. France have just announced that they are going to need to have customs officers on Eurostar trains monitoring luggage, monitoring goods as well coming through, into the EU from January the 1st. This will increase delays further, of course, and it's because there has not yet been an agreement on customs controls between the UK and France. Now, this is a separate agreement between the UK and France here. The EU as a whole don't need to get involved in it. They've said that France are fine to deal with it as they see fit. Now, the UK, in theory, will have to carry out these checks as well the other way. I've not heard that that's going to happen because this Brexit government, that bangs on all the time about wanting to tighten our border controls, despite being basically the only European country not to do so during the initial COVID outbreak, seems to want to solve all customs problems by just waving everyone through and everything through. Oh, are you shipping undocumented weapons into the country? Yeah, we haven't got time to check the paperwork anyway. In you come. Oh, that lorry might be stuffed full of undocumented migrants. We can't check them, so in you come, son. Oh, what's that? You don't know if your goods are allowed in the UK or not? Well, of course they can come into the UK because we can't be arsed checking anything anyway. We don't have the staff all the time or the systems to do it. The difficult sticking point regarding the Channel Tunnel is, as always, so-called pure Brexit ideology. So, seeing as things stand, there are some issues that, were it to be a problem, would be sent to the European Court of Justice for resolution, because that's who takes care of these matters. Now, here's the thing. Boris Johnson has said that the European Court of Justice will no longer have any role in matters involving the UK at all after the end of the transition period. Of course, that's not what he signed into law earlier this year. The legally binding portion of the withdrawal agreement, never mind just the political declaration, the legally binding portion of the withdrawal agreement, if you do a little search for the European Court of Justice, it pops up a few times, because this is now an international treaty that he backs down from breaking in the end. And it makes clear that there are actually still areas under the court's jurisdiction even after the end of the transition period. And all it will take is for something to come up that is referred to the court, and another of Johnson's Brexit lies will be exposed. It would come as a bit of a shock to the temporarily happy Brexiteers if in 2021 or beyond, the European Court of Justice finds against the UK government on a matter. They'll go, what? They'll wonder what happened. So Boris Johnson wishes to avoid this, and so he's been quite difficult over the issues of trains, say, passing between France and England under the sea. Essentially, there needs to be a body that decides on legal disputes concerning the Channel Tunnel. Otherwise, what will happen is you'll have two sets of regulations governing it. You'll have the UK setting regulations, you'll have France setting regulations. You can't just overlap two sets of regulations, particularly as that could potentially be antagonistic. And it would certainly be less efficient, and it would make the operation of the tunnel legally impossible. So issues cited will include, for example, qualifications for the drivers. You know, just a bit like, bear in mind, I ought to pop this up. I think the Irish Foreign Minister was talking about this yesterday. Just reminding people, for example, that if you happen to be in Ireland at the moment, but you've got a UK driving licence, in a couple of weeks' time, you're not qualified to drive in Ireland because that's not valid. Similar sort of thing for train drivers. You need qualifications, and, you know, if the UK has its own regulatory framework, then that means they're going to need a qualification from the UK side as well as the front. You're going to need two sets of qualifications. That sounds quite minor to me, however, because then you've also got systems, how signals operate, radio systems, ventilation, everything. You can't have two systems for that. It's inefficient to have two systems for qualifications for the drivers, but you could do it. You can't have two systems in terms of how the tunnel actually operates. They're just not things you can have. And you know, it was described as having like a highway code, for example, where you could drive on either the left or the right side of the road. It's up to you. We know that doesn't work. That just doesn't work. But that's the equivalent here. So there has to be one set of rules. And there has to be one panel dealing with dispute resolutions. Without that agreement, the Channel Tunnel could have to be closed. It's not going to be immediate, this one. It will operate initially, of course, because, well, at the moment there's been no divergence, I should say, sorry. But as soon as the UK government decides to want to apply its own regulations that are fundamentally different to those that are applied by France, completely unworkable. Now, as with all things like this, there'd be nothing to stop at all the UK and France just jointly agreeing to set up a different panel. I've said this with Brexit in general before, doesn't technically have to be the European Court of Justice. That's not an absolute situation. You could set up your own panel, for example. There's been a suggestion that they could just use the International Court of Arbitration. I mean, that's outside of the EU, sort of. And that would deal with the problem. But the problem there is we haven't done that. That has not been set up. And we're 2 weeks away from it potentially being a bit of a problem. Though it isn't expected, as I say, to be a problem as soon as it could be. You know, it's not, for example, it's not like the European Court's caseload is full of issues pertaining to the Channel Tunnel. It's I gather, very, very rare that issues arise at all. And there is a common framework of regulations as well. It only becomes an issue if a dispute arises or the UK tries to change something. Now, there won't necessarily be a dispute arising potentially for years. That's possible. But the chances are that UK will seek to try and change something. I mean, I suppose that would in itself create a dispute. And it is possible that, I suppose, sensitive to these issues, Boris Johnson's government would not actually seek to do anything to change. Because the way you'd look at it is they want to change a lot of things with Brexit. Maybe they'd take a light touch there. You know, in the midst of miles of tailbacks of lorries at ports and extra difficulty in British citizens travelling to the EU, which, by the way, doesn't go away even once we've got our systems set up. I don't think anybody would thank Boris Johnson for closing down the tunnel as well because he wants to change some regulation unnecessarily. I also gather that safety certificates have been rolled over until next September anyway. So both sides have agreed to, you know, that the situation is stable for 9 months into Brexit. So there could still be time to get an agreement before it all goes tits up. They've at least got 9 months and a couple of weeks rather than just less than a couple of weeks now. But if the issue from my point of view is what is the Brexit attitude that's going to take precedent here? Is it going to be pragmatism? In other words, well, we need an agreement. We understand that we need an agreement that both sides will be happy with. So we are prepared to be pragmatic and come up with something sensible. Or is it going to be the sort of pure Brexit ideology, the sort that shoots itself in the face? Is that the one that's going to persist? In a way, a deal would be a bit of an indicator of this. At the moment, I mean, in theory, as this video comes out, another deadline has passed. Do you know what? I'm going to guess that it came and went with barely a mention. Who knows? Maybe we've got a deal now. I suspect not. But it's one of those things. The deal itself doesn't necessarily help this situation. But if we do get a deal, that indicates that Brexit pragmatism must have, come to the fore, because that's the only way to get a deal. The pure Brexit ideology doesn't allow a deal with the EU. So if we get a deal, then that means that the government are prepared to be pragmatic, and that maybe bodes well for in 9 months getting an agreement over the Channel Tunnel. But if we don't get a deal with the EU, that might suggest that the pure Brexit ideology is still in the driving seat, at which point that same thing would knacker the Channel Tunnel agreement as well. And in the meantime, Eurostar services have already had to be scaled back because of the general uncertainty over Brexit, as well as, of course, COVID. There are countries that are already stopping travel. Like I think the Netherlands is now saying, can we not have flights from the UK, please? Because you seem to have a serious problem there. And as I mentioned at the start, there are going to be those extra checks on goods and luggage anyway, which of course is going to delay the service further. But that's the situation at the moment. Hope you found the video interesting. If you did, don't forget to click the like button. If you'd like to support the channel further, please also click the Patreon link for details. And until next time, I'll see you later.